My parents smiled and said, "Family means sacrifice." When I found out my sister just bought a new house with my name on the mortgage papers, so I said, "Lawyer up. I'll see you in court." I'm 29, and if you told me 5 years ago that I'd be sitting in a courtroom being sued by my own parents for $500,000, I would have laughed. I always thought we were a close-knit family. We did Sunday dinners. My mom still mailed me birthday cards with cheesy jokes inside. My dad gave me his old toolbox when I moved out. Normal stuff. But somewhere between my sister's big dreams and my parents' warped sense of family loyalty, everything cracked wide open. I didn't even see it coming. It started when my younger sister Isla turned 25. She's always had this princess aura, the kind of person who speaks in statements that sound like demands, but you're never quite sure until she gives you that expectant look. She had been bouncing between jobs since college, never staying long enough to figure out if she even liked them. One week she wanted to run a bakery. Next, it was interior design. Then she got obsessed with crystals and said she needed a peaceful space to align her energy. That was the phrase she used when she told my parents she wanted to move out. But not into some apartment. No, Isla needed a real house with a backyard and space for manifestation. I thought she was joking. My parents didn't laugh. They nodded. They actually nodded like it made perfect sense that someone with no job, no savings, and no clue was suddenly ready to own a home. I brushed it off. I figured they'd offer her some help with rent or maybe co-sign a lease. But then one night, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was calm, cheerful even. "Can you come over for dinner next Saturday? We have something important to discuss." I should have known. You don't get called in for a family discussion unless something's already been decided behind your back. I showed up that weekend with a bottle of wine, expecting maybe a chat about holiday plans or, worst case scenario, a group intervention for Isla's new obsession with chakra alignment. Instead, I walked into a full meal laid out like a celebration. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, wine glasses already poured. Isla was practically glowing. Dad patted the seat next to him. "We have some exciting news." Mom handed me a thick envelope. "We bought Isla a house." I blinked. "You? What?" Isla beamed. "It's perfect. 3 bedrooms, a little garden out back, and only 10 minutes from that yoga studio I like." I just stared at them. It was like the room had tilted slightly, and everyone was speaking a language I didn't know. My parents, the same people who told me to take out student loans for college because we believe in self-reliance, who made me work part-time all through school to cover my own expenses, who refused to help with my first apartment, saying, "It's time you learn how to budget." They bought my sister a house. But that wasn't the worst part. Not by a mile. Mom clasped her hands together. "It's in both your names. Well, technically the mortgage is in yours." I felt my stomach drop. Dad leaned in like he was giving me financial advice. "Your credit score is strong. We figured this would be a good family investment. Ila's still working on hers." I pulled the papers out of the envelope. Mortgage documents, co-signer agreements, legal paperwork. All filled out, all ready for me to sign. "You want me to take out a mortgage for her?" My voice cracked. "Are you serious?" Isla scoffed. "It's not for me. It's for us. Family helps family." I looked back and forth between them. My heart was pounding. Not from anger, not yet, but from confusion. Was this a joke? Was there a camera somewhere? "Why would I do that?" I asked. Mom's smile faded. "Because family means sacrifice, Alex. We've always believed in supporting each other. You're in a position to help. It's just paperwork." That word just sent a spike of heat up my spine. Just paperwork. Just a $500,000 debt tied to my name. Just risking my financial future for someone who'd never held a steady job for more than 6 months. I set the papers down. "I'm not signing anything." Isla looked insulted. Wow. So much for being the responsible one. Dad's tone shifted. He dropped the friendly act. "You wouldn't be where you are without us. We raised you. We give you everything. All we're asking for is a little help." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd worked my way through college, built a stable career in tech, lived frugally, paid off my loans early, all because I had to. They made me. Now, when I'd finally found some financial peace, they wanted to drag me into $500,000 of debt. I stood up. "No, I'm not doing this. The rest of the dinner was tense. Isla cried. Mom called me selfish. Dad made some vague threat about disrespect and how I was turning my back on family. I left without dessert. I thought that was the end of it. I figured they'd cool off, maybe sell the house, or rent it out to cover the payments. I stopped taking calls for a few weeks, needing space to breathe. But then I got a letter, a formal one, with a law firm's letterhead. My parents were suing me. Specifically, they claimed I had promised to support the family by co-signing the mortgage. And when I backed out, they were left with damages, namely the $500,000 loan they had taken out in my name without my permission. The house had already been purchased. Somehow, I still don't fully understand how they used some forged documents and an old power of attorney I'd signed during college to list me as a guarantor. And now they wanted the court to make it official. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I stared at the letter sitting on the edge of my bed, reading the words over and over. Ela had posted a selfie from her new kitchen just the day before, with the caption, "Manifestation works." I hired a lawyer the next day, the kind that doesn't smile much, which honestly made me trust him more. He read the letter, leaned back, and said, "You've got a real mess here." The legal process dragged for months. My credit got flagged. I had to freeze my accounts. I couldn't even apply for a loan for my own place while this was pending. Every family gathering was a landmine. At Easter, Mom cornered me and whispered, "You could end this whenever you want. Just do the right thing." I laughed in her face. I had to. It was that or scream. The court date finally arrived. I wore my best suit. My lawyer had coached me through every possible outcome, but nothing could prepare me for seeing my parents on the opposite side of a courtroom, sitting behind their lawyer like they were the victims. Then the judge walked in, middle-aged, steely eyes, no-nonsense vibe. He flipped through the paperwork for a long time. The courtroom was silent. My heart pounded in my ears. Finally, he looked up, peering over his glasses at my parents. Then he turned to their lawyer. "I have just one question," he said, tapping the papers with his pen. "If the defendant never signed these documents, and you admit they were completed before he saw them, then what exactly are you basing this claim on?" Their lawyer froze. He opened his mouth and nothing came out. And right then, in that exact moment, I felt something shift. Not just in the courtroom, but in me. Everything was about to change. The silence in the courtroom stretched on like an eternity. I sat there, watching their lawyer fumble with his notes, his lips twitching like he was searching for the right words but couldn't find any. My parents didn't seem to understand what had just happened. My mom looked from him to the judge, confused, and my dad sat stone-faced, arms crossed, like he was still confident this was all going to go their way. But I knew the look on the judge's face. It was the look of someone who saw through the act. The judge leaned forward, resting his elbows on the bench. "You're alleging that your son, the defendant, entered into a binding financial agreement involving a mortgage, an agreement for which you provide no valid signature, no consent, and no confirmed communication. And you're asking this court to enforce that based on a conversation." My parents' lawyer stammered, "We, have witness statements from..." "From whom?" the judge interrupted sharply. "From the co-beneficiary, the sister who now lives in the house in question." The lawyer looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. He gestured to my sister, who was seated behind my parents in a pale pink blouse and too much perfume. She gave a small, nervous wave, like this was a PDA meeting. The judge stared at her for a moment, then turned back to the lawyer. "Let me rephrase. You're asking me to enforce a $500,000 debt against someone who never signed anything, never verbally consented, and whose credit was leveraged based on a forged document." He tapped the file again. A document, I might add, that was based on a 10-year-old limited power of attorney for a completely unrelated matter. My lawyer didn't even need to speak. He just glanced at me, then sat back and let the judge keep going. "What I'm seeing here," the judge said slowly, deliberately, "is a pattern of entitlement, poor judgment, and, at the very least, fraudulent behavior. If I dig further, I may find cause for criminal charges, not just a civil dismissal." My mom visibly palled. My dad shifted in his seat for the first time. The lawyer raised his hands. "Your Honor, perhaps we could..." "No," the judge snapped, voice sharp and cold. You've wasted this court's time with a frivolous and frankly insulting case. This is an abuse of the legal system. Unless you can produce actual evidence within the next 5 minutes showing this man willingly accepted $500,000 of liability, I am prepared to rule on this today." The lawyer turned and looked at my parents like he wanted to strangle them. My mom whispered something, panicked, her eyes darting around the room. My dad just shook his head. I could tell he still didn't understand. In his mind, family meant ownership. If he raised me, he owned a piece of me. If they paid for school lunches and took me to soccer practice, they were entitled to my bank account forever. It made me sick. The judge stood up. "I'll give you 5 minutes to confer. After that, we'll reconvene for my ruling." They huddled with their lawyer, whispering intensely. My sister sat alone behind them, staring down at her phone. She didn't say a word. No apology. No guilt. Just scrolling through her notifications like she wasn't sitting in the middle of a disaster her entitlement had caused. I felt nothing toward her in that moment. Not even anger. Just emptiness. My lawyer leaned toward me and murmured, "They're going to fold. They'll offer to drop it before you can sue them for damages." I didn't say anything back. I was still trying to understand how we got here. How the same parents who used to pack my lunch every morning could look me in the eye and try to ruin my life to cover their poor financial decisions. All for Ila. Always for Ila. The judge returned to the bench. "Mr. and Mrs. Bradford, do you wish to proceed?" Their lawyer stood up slowly. "Your Honor, after reviewing the documentation, the plaintiffs would like to withdraw their claim." The judge nodded. "Very well. Case dismissed." I felt a weight lift from my chest that I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. I hadn't lost everything. My credit would recover. My finances would bounce back. But my relationship with my family, that was a different story. As I stood to leave, my mother rushed up to me, grabbing my arm. "Alex, please. You don't understand what kind of pressure we've been under." I pulled my arm free. "I understand perfectly," I said. "You saw me as a bank account, not a son." She looked like I'd slapped her. Dad didn't say a word. He just glared at me like I'd betrayed them, like I was the one who had dragged them into court. And then behind them, Ila stood. She opened her mouth as if to say something, maybe to apologize, maybe to justify, but I walked past her without stopping. She didn't follow. That night, I sat in my apartment, small, rented, nothing fancy, and let it all sink in. I had no family now. Not really. Not the kind that loves unconditionally. But I had something better. I had freedom. I had peace. I had control over my own life. And tomorrow, I'd be making a phone call that would change everything for them. Because while the civil case was dismissed, my lawyer and I weren't done yet. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I hadn't slept much, but my mind felt clear in a way it hadn't in weeks, months even. The last of the courtroom's echoes still rang in my head. The judge's voice, calm but sharp. My mother's voice, desperate. Ila's silence. But there was no guilt, just quiet resolve. I made coffee, sat at my tiny kitchen table, and opened my laptop. I still had the folders. Every document, every forged signature, every transaction involving my name. What they'd done wasn't just a betrayal. It was fraud, identity theft, bank fraud. And while I'd always seen myself as someone who avoided conflict, someone who didn't push too hard or rock the boat, that person didn't live here anymore. I opened an email draft to my lawyer. Subject line, next steps. Attached every file I had. Mortgage paperwork, bank statements, power of attorney from college that they'd misused, screenshots of texts, notes from every call I'd had with them since this mess began. Everything. Before hitting send, I hovered for a second. Was I really going to do this? Then I remembered sitting in the bank weeks earlier trying to figure out why my credit report had a $500,000 mortgage I'd never applied for. I remembered the pit in my stomach, the sweat in my palms, the rising panic, the feeling of being trapped. I hit send. Within an hour, my lawyer responded. Let's talk today. We'll start with filing a police report and a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. If they want to play games, they chose the wrong one. I closed the laptop and sat back. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Not entirely. It was about justice and making sure they never did this to anyone again. A week passed before anything major happened. My parents didn't reach out. Neither did I. I heard from a distant cousin that they were laying low, and that Isla had stopped posting her usual daily affirmations and boomerangs from her back patio. I hadn't told anyone what was coming. Not yet. Then, I got a call. "Mr. Bradford," said a deep, serious voice. "This is Detective Moretti from the Financial Crimes Unit. We've received your attorney's documentation. I have a few questions for you." He was calm, direct, and surprisingly patient. He asked if I knew when the forged documents were submitted, if I had any evidence that my parents had access to my old paperwork, and whether I'd ever agreed verbally or in writing to be involved in the mortgage. I told him everything. He said, "This isn't going away quietly. If what you're telling me checks out, and so far it does, there could be felony charges. Just be prepared for pushback." Pushback came 2 days later. My mom showed up outside my apartment. She was standing there when I came home from work, wearing one of her good coats, holding a Tupperware of homemade soup, like we were still on good terms. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly. I didn't say anything, just walked past her, keys in hand. She followed. "Please don't do this. Your father is already stressed. Isla's devastated." I unlocked my door, but didn't open it yet. "You forged my name on a $500,000 mortgage." Her expression flickered. "We didn't forge anything. You filled out the forms and submitted them without telling me." She looked around like someone might be watching. "You know your sister needs help. She can't do this alone. You're the only one who's ever been successful. Is this really what you want? To destroy your own family?" I turned and looked her dead in the eye. "You already destroyed it." Her face collapsed. She reached out like she wanted to hug me, but I stepped back. "You sued me. You lied to the court. You tried to ruin my life. And now that the spotlight's on you, suddenly I'm your son again." Her voice cracked. "We didn't think you'd go this far." That was it. That sentence. They didn't think I'd fight back. I opened the door and stepped inside. "Go home, Mom, and get a lawyer." I shut the door behind me. That night, I got a call from Leah. I hesitated before picking up, but I needed to know what she'd say. Her voice was small. No smugness, no spiritual buzzwords, just a quiet, "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. She added, "I didn't know they used your old documents. I thought you'd agreed to it, like off the record." "You thought I agreed to take on $500,000 of debt and just didn't show up to the closing?" "I don't know, Alex." She snapped suddenly. "They said you were fine with it. I trusted them. They're our parents." I let the silence sit. Then I said, "That trust is how they get away with everything." She exhaled. "They're freaking out. I think they know it's serious now." It was serious when they dragged me into court. Lala didn't respond to that. Eventually she said, "Are you really pressing charges?" I didn't answer. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her I was going to hold every one of them accountable, that I was done being the reliable one they could quietly bleed dry, that I was going to be more than a silent, obedient wallet. But instead, I just said, "I'm not playing their game anymore," and I hung up. But the truth was, this was only the beginning. My lawyer had just received a file from the mortgage company, a signed affidavit, a name, a timestamp, and something very, very interesting. A recorded phone call between my father and the loan officer. And that call, it was going to change everything. The next morning, I met with my lawyer in his office. He'd already printed out the transcript of the recorded call. And when he handed it to me, he didn't say anything, just washed my face as I read. It was worse than I expected. It wasn't just a forged signature. My dad had actually called the mortgage officer and pretended to be me. Voice lowered slightly, giving authorization to proceed, answering security questions that were clearly pre-repped, making comments like, "Yes, I'm aware of the risks, and this is for my sister, so we're doing this as a family favor." And then the kicker, the part where the loan officer asked, "Can you confirm, just for the record, that you are Alex Bradford?" And my father, my own father, said, "Yes, this is Alex Bradford." It was identity fraud, plain and simple, on tape. I handed the transcript back to my lawyer and leaned back in the chair. "That's it." Then he nodded. I forwarded everything to the Financial Crimes Unit and the State Attorney's Office. They're moving forward. And just a heads up, when the subpoenas start coming in, it's going to get messy. I swallowed hard, but nodded. Good. Over the next 2 weeks, things moved fast. The bank's fraud department launched their own internal investigation. I received notice that my name was being removed from the mortgage. not because of a kindness, but because of a confirmed violation of their own lending policies. The bank wanted nothing to do with the mess my parents had created. And then the real storm hit.
I was at work when I got the call.
"Alex," Detective Moretti said, "we've issued arrest warrants for your parents, your father on 2 counts of financial fraud and 1 count of identity theft, your mother as a co-conspirator for knowingly aiding in the submission of false documents." I didn't speak for a few seconds. "They'll be processed and released," he continued, "but the DA is serious about pursuing this, especially with the call recording." It didn't feel real. I thanked him, hung up, and sat there in silence. That night, I got a barrage of calls and messages from extended family, from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, some angry, some stunned. My aunt called crying, saying, "Why would you do this to your parents?" And all I could say was, "I didn't do this to them. They did it to me." A few days later, I was served with notice that my parents were countersuing again, this time for defamation of character. My lawyer laughed out loud when he read it. "Let them try. Every filing just adds fuel to our case." The hearing for the criminal charges was set for a month later. In that time, the entire dynamic of my family fractured. Ela moved back in with my aunt, claiming she felt unsafe in the house. The mortgage had defaulted. The property was in pre-foreclosure. The backyard full of manifestation crystals now sat empty, overgrown with weeds. The day of the hearing came. It wasn't a trial, just the initial arraignment. But I went anyway. I needed to see it. I walked into the courtroom and saw my parents seated up front, flanked by their new attorney. My dad looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just diminished, like something in him had collapsed under the weight of his own pride. My mom wouldn't look at me. When the judge read the charges, fraud, forgery, identity theft, I watched my father flinch ever so slightly. It was the first time I'd seen any crack in his armor. Their lawyer tried to get the charges dropped, argued that it was a family misunderstanding, that my father acted in good faith and believed he had verbal consent. But the judge wasn't buying it. "The defendant impersonated his son on a recorded line," she said. "That's not a misunderstanding. That's a felony." Bail was set. They didn't go to jail, but the damage was done. After the hearing, I walked out into the hall. My mom followed. I heard her footsteps behind me, but didn't turn. "Alex," she said, her voice shaky, "please just talk to us. This has gone too far." I turned slowly and looked at her. Really looked at her. She was wearing the same gold necklace she always wore, the one Dad gave her for their anniversary years ago. Her eyes were red. She looked tired, older than I remembered. "You could have apologized," I said quietly. "At any point you could have said, 'We were wrong, we messed up, we're sorry,' and I might have listened." Tears welled in her eyes. "We thought we were doing what was best for the family." "No," I said. "You were doing what was best for Isla. You've always done what's best for Isla. And when I said no, when I finally put up a boundary, you treated me like an enemy." She looked down. "We raised you," she whispered. "We sacrificed so much." "And I paid for my own college," I shot back. "I paid rent while working 3 jobs. I built everything I have without you. And when I finally had something of my own, you tried to steal it." She said nothing. "I don't hate you," I added, quieter now. "But I can't forgive you. Not for this." Then I turned and walked away. She didn't follow. Weeks passed. Eventually, the house was repossessed, sold off by the bank. Ela tried to claim it was unfair, but no one listened. She moved in with a friend, started posting cryptic quotes online about letting go of toxic energy and learning to cut cords. I didn't respond to any of them. My parents pleaded down the charges. They avoided jail time, got probation, and had to pay restitution, including legal fees. Their reputation in the community took a hit, though. My dad had to resign from the board of a local nonprofit. My mom stopped showing up at church. And me, I moved out of my tiny apartment, bought a modest place in the city, nothing flashy, but mine. Fully mine. I didn't invite anyone to the housewarming. No parents, no cousins, not even Isla. Just a few friends, some takeout, and a quiet toast to a future I built by myself. And I've never felt lighter. The last text I got from my mom came a few months later. It read, "We miss you. Please come home for Thanksgiving. Let's start over. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I turned off my phone, and I finally, truly moved.